Morning, everyone. Got about 1 minute before it's time for us to start. Hi, how's everyone this morning? About time to get started. It's 9 o'clock. I want to begin by saying happy birthday, Juanita. I hope I look as good as you when I get to be 30. Good to see everyone this morning. I made a passing comment to Brother and Sister Michael here when they come by. I said, you know what, I'm tired of getting teased with rain. I'm ready for some rain. Everything around the house there needs a little water. Let me putting it on it. So, Lord will give it to us when it's time. My dad always had a favorite saying. I'd hear him say it more than a few times. He'd say, if the good Lord put us in charge of the weather, we'd mess that up too. So we'll just take what he gives us. So I agree with that. So how is everyone this morning? Good? Hope you had a good week? Good, good. So last 3 or 4 weeks, and we got one more week, and then we'll turn it over. I can't remember who's next, but for the last 3 weeks, we studied how to make our life matter, and some of the attributes that perhaps we should put on as Christians in order to make our life matter even more. Everyone matters. That's not the point. The point is our walk, how can we make it matter more to God? Not to you, God. That's what we're here to do. We're here to serve Him and to grow. And so far, we've studied living trustfully. We've studied living virtuously. And we've looked at living graciously. And as I told you last week, I've picked 5 topics out that I think I need to work on. So I did that in order to prepare myself and say, this week we want to look at living reverently. Living reverently. And I think sometimes that's a subject that we go from one extreme to the other. And what I intend to do, as always, is not to be the authority on the subject, but perhaps to stimulate your thinking for further study and perhaps cause you to think about something that maybe you haven't before, or give you the opportunity to come up to me later and say, Steve, this is something I think you need to consider. So it's all about us. It's not about me. It's about we. So living reverently. Okay? And our text for today is taken from the Psalms. And it's Psalms 130. If you want to turn over there real quick. And we're kind of going to be moving around a little bit today in our Bible. And I don't necessarily apologize for that, but it will keep you busy a little bit. But I hope it proves the point, or it, again, has the desired effect of stimulating your thinking. So Psalms 130. And this is one, give you just a second to turn there. And there are 15 Psalms that are called a Psalm of Ascent. Okay, and these were somewhat, and I don't know if you've ever thought about that or not, but when they call it a Psalm of Ascent, it's something that, like I said, there was only 15 of them, and it was something that they also called them gradual psalms. They were songs of degrees, songs of steps. Now file that away, songs of steps. Let's file that away. And also it was a song for going up to worship. All right, that's what a song of ascent was written for. And like I said, there was 15 in the book of Psalms. And our text this morning is taken from Psalms 130. In the context of living reverently. Okay? And the specific verses are 3 and 4. And it says this: If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. Forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. You say, okay, well, how does that jive with reverence, being reverent? So if you look at that specifically, let me ask you a question. What does it mean to be reverent? What does the word reverent mean to you as a definition? Not as a state of being, but reverent as a word, definition. Look up to. Admire. I'm sorry, Jerry, I missed that last one. Respect. Okay. Anybody else? Reverent. When you think of the word reverent, what comes to your mind, Charles? Okay, good. Anybody else? Listen to. The word reverent. Okay. Anybody else want to offer a thought there? Did somebody raise their hand? Ron?
Somebody you respect.
All right. Somebody you respect. Did I see a hand over here that I missed? You ought to throw them up high. I'll get on a roll, and I miss people sometimes, and I apologize for that. Okay, well, let me just give you a written definition, and maybe some words that are similar. If you look at the word reverent, and I hate screensavers. It's the act of showing deep and solemn respect. That is the word reverent. Okay? Of showing deep respect. Now, there's different levels of how you can show respect. Right? I think we all agree with that. Now, living with reverence. What does it mean to be living with reverence? That becomes the state of being. You know, if we live a reverent life, it has certain attributes to it, and that's what we're called to do. And what I want to do today is I want to take us back and show us what God thinks of reverence. Give you a classic example here in a minute, I hope. But when you look at reverence, here's a definition that I think is fitting. It says it's been defined as a feeling or attitude of deep respect, love, and awe. Also as for something that is sacred. Reverence. That's a love or awe of something that you consider to be sacred. Now, when you have a deep reverence for something or somebody, you act a certain way. Would you agree to that? If you have that kind of feeling, how do you act?
You act kind and good. In other words, you speak mildly. And if you think of something will offset the idea, don't say it. And the other person won't know what you was about to say.
So he might have hurt your feelings, but out of respect for him, you keep your mouth shut. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
I get you.
Be quiet.
Okay. I can learn from that, and I appreciate you saying that. I can learn from that. Brother John, I got my duct tape. I'm right here. Okay, so let me offer a few suggestions of similar words. I gave you the written definition, but alternate definitions for reverence. Respectful. Worshiping. That's acting. Worshipful. That's the mindset. Adoring. Loving. Devoted. Dutiful. Awed. Submissive. Humble. And meek. That's reverence, to me, wrapped up in a nice, tight package. And each one of them has a different They're similar, but they're a little different. And it's a depends answer, right? It depends on the application. It depends on what you're doing at the time or what's in play. As an example, would you say there's a quiet reverence? Would you say there is a loud reverence? Loud or actionable? Don't think about that for a minute. Now, if you have, let me give you an example. If we talk about quiet reverence, if we go, and this might not be the case anymore, but when I was growing up, if you went to a funeral, what did you not see? You didn't see everybody talking about, they were focused, they were very respectful for that family who had lost a loved one. They were there because, now that's not always the case. There's a lot of people would like to be at a funeral sometimes that can't be there. That does not mean they don't have reverence for that person. But if you were in that audience, your focus was not necessarily the dead person, but the family. Right? It was the reverence for that family that you wanted to show respect for them because you know they had a loss and you were there to support them. And to support them, you took on a frame of mind and you acted a certain way to show them, and I call that a quiet reverence. You wouldn't get up and clap and carry on. You might not just blurt out things, Brother Quick. You would sit there in utmost reverence out of respect for that family because you knew what they were going through. That's an example of quiet reverence. Now, what about the flip side of that? We spend a lot of time on this side of the quiet reverence, but what about another way to look at that? Let's call it active reverence. Now, remember, I gave you all those definitions of what reverence is, but what would be a good example of an active reverence in the context of God? Anybody? Absolutely, you show reverence. That's an active reverence. Obedience. What about, think about David. You talk about an active reverence as it relates to God. What about singing? Why do you sing? I mean, this is rhetorical. Why do you sing? Why do you serve others? Not necessarily for them. Somebody you don't know. If you see someone on the street that needs help and you walk away from them, think about the Good Samaritan. That's an active reverence because that's what God called us to be. All right? Active reverence is worshipful in nature. You said that. That's one of the definitions for it. Worshipful. So if we are worshipful and we have an active reverence, we sing. But we can sing and show an active reverence to God outside His house. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see. Yeah.
Child, and we used to talk about defending the faith, and being obedient and being loudly reverent means that we are a defender of the faith, that we're defending and proclaiming. So I look at God as reverence and prayer.
So basically what you're saying is an act of reverence is obeying what God instructed us to do and giving us situations. That's what I heard. Depending on what you're faced with, right? The way you respond to that, that's an act of reverence, and I agree with that. I want to keep this now. We kind of got a feel for reverence. There are different modes of reverence. You know, you could have a reverence for someone, like you say, Gary, like God, and then you can speak out when you have an opportunity to do so out of respect for Him, because that's what He called us to do, right? All right, so let's be just a little more specific now. Let's turn over, and I want to take us down the path with King David. All right, let's go to 1 Samuel, if you will. Follow me over there to 1 Samuel, chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. And I kind of want to set this up just a little bit, and we will talk about it and kind of grind it out a little bit, if you will. We want to dissect it a little bit. And now, in this particular context, this is after that the Israelites had been saved, or they had been delivered, if you will, from the Philistines. Now, one of the things I want to tell you is that the Philistines, in their arrogance and pompous way of living, they took the Ark of the Covenant back with them. Remember that? If you look at the chapter before that, when they defeated Israel and wiped them out because of Israel's disobedience to God, they took the Ark of the Covenant back there. And what happened to several people, several different groups of them, that God cursed them. They had all kind of plagues because they had the Ark of the Covenant. Well, when God delivered Israel from the Philistines said, here, I'm paraphrasing here, come get this ark. Get it out of here. Killing us. All right, it was a trophy, so to speak, but that trophy was killing them. So in that process, it's just fast forward, they brought the Ark of the Covenant to the house of Abinadab. Remember that? All right, now here's what I want to point out to you. That Ark of the Covenant stayed in the house of Abinadab for 20 years. All right? Somebody read 1 Psalm 7, 1 and 2. 1 Samuel 7, 1 and 2. Go ahead. Okay, so the point I want to get from those scriptures is that, number one, that after they brought the ark back, they brought it to the house of Abinadab, and it stayed there for 20 years. Okay? All right, let's look at 2 Samuel. Let's go to 2 Samuel, chapter 6. And I want to pick up at about verse 3. Now they decided that now this ark has been in Abinadab's house for 20 years. They decided, David said, I want to move this ark to Jerusalem. Okay, so 2 Samuel 6, verses 3 and 4. So now this is David. He said, well, let me start up here at first. It says, now David began and gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. What an entourage. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him to whatever that name is, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name, the very name of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned above the cherubim. Now here we go. They placed the ark of God on a new cart, and they might bring it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were leading the new cart. Now you didn't get that to begin with. That was you got Ahio, that's my way of saying it, and Uzzah. Now if you look at that a little closely, That doesn't mean that those were his sons, but that word means it could have been his grandsons. It can mean descendants. So it's either his son or his grandson, but it was a direct descendant of Abinadab. 20 years had passed. Now think about this. That ark had been in his household for 20 years. And these two guys that were leading that ark, they had been around that ark for a long time. If it was his son, quite some time. But they were very familiar with the Ark of the Covenant. So they didn't just throw it on a cart and give it to somebody. God led them to that place. He kept it, and these are either his sons or his grandsons that are pulling that cart. That's significant to me. All right? So, what happened? When they moved the ark. Now, if you look at that, you say, okay, what's going on here? He's got the ark. They got it on a new cart. And all he did was, and there's some speculation that as this cart was going, that the ox kicked at the goat. We all know what a goat is. It sticks his leg to make him calm him down so he won't fight. But he's kind of irritable right there at one point. If you get stuck with a spear, you're gonna jump, I would expect. But for whatever reason, it was either bad land the cart was going across, or maybe an ox kicked or whatever, but it shook the cart. And these two boys were manning that cart, and for whatever reason, the ark started shaking. And then all he did, think about it, all he did was stick his hand up there or whatever to steady it. What happened to him? Tell me, what did he do? He died on the spot. You think that's pretty harsh? Maybe if that's all you see in that scripture. So let's take a walk back. Let's take a walk back. Let's go back to. Let me ask you this question: is reverence important to God? Do you think so? I'm going to ask you another question. This is not loaded. I've said this before, and I believe this. If something was an abomination to God in the Old Testament, do you think it's not an abomination to Him in the New Testament? It's the same thing, isn't it, Brother Quick? So, are we saying that if He hated it then, God being God, He hates it now? There's a lot of people that don't believe that. They think that don't apply. God don't change. And that's stinking thinking. And what we've got to do is that we've got to figure out as we read God's Word, we can learn about God. We can learn what makes a difference to Him. We can learn what He don't like. We can learn what He loves. We can learn the nature of God all through the Old Testament. So one thing that He made emphatically clear is that reverence was important when you approached Him. Thank God many of us are not there today, or we wouldn't be here talking. I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's go back to the book of Numbers. Now, turn over to Numbers chapter 4. Numbers chapter 4. And while you're getting there, the one thing I want to try to point out is that on the surface, we might think that God striking of the dead was drastic. We might think that. But God don't make no mistakes. God's not unfair. God is righteous. And God is a God of justice. And I want to point something out to you. We all want to be a person of justice. And all of us feel like we want justice, justice, justice. Do you really? God is a just God. And there's no amount, if God could stand us in front of Him right now and He could dissect us one layer at a time to how we are not righteous, and none of us, just like the psalmist said, God, none of us could stand without your forgiveness. And we would not have stood, and we would not have an opportunity to stand had it not been for the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Don't forget that. We were all lost until that time. We were all hanging in the balance. Unless what God will save who He's going to save, and He's going to do whatever He's going to do. God's going to be God. But we had no approach to God directly, no reconciliation until Jesus Christ came, died, and was resurrected from the dead. That in itself is the only way that we can stand before God with all our frailty, because He is between us and God as our advocate. Hit your need, brother. Go in a closet where there's no light and turn it out. That's black, where you can't see your hand. That's outer darkness. That's your key out of outer darkness. Jesus Christ. You have to be afraid of God in order to be respectful of Him. And I do think that we do not approach God reverently because we have lost our sense of awe for God Almighty. We take Him flippantly. And we don't realize how awe-inspiring He is and what He's done for us, because do we commune with Him on a routine basis? Do we really understand what He's done for us? Now let's get back to the lesson. I'm off my stump. In Numbers, if you thought it was evil, or not evil, but if you thought it was drastic on God's part that He killed Uzzah, just like that, let's see what He did in Numbers 4. And let the old man get there. I usually have mine marked, but I didn't today. Numbers chapter 4. And there's a point to this. And when you get into chapter 4, let's look at it this way. This is the duty to the Kohathites. And the Kohathites were a tribe of the Levitical priests, right? They were the Levites. And they were the only ones that were assigned to move the Ark of the Covenant. God, when He said, when you go to my Ark, I want you to just read those laws. You might think, well, those are boring. No. He was absolutely emphatic of how you treat each individual segment of my holy things, my ark, a certain way, or there's consequences to that. All right? And one of those things, when we talk about Uzzah and reverence, and we talk about it in chapter 4 there, this is where they're assigning those who are going to work with the ark, how they're supposed to go about doing it. Okay? And the holy things. I mean, it was very detailed. And we're going to start at let's look at verse 6. Better than that, chapter 4, verse 1 says, and I'm reading from the New American Standard. It says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, Take a census of the descendants of Kohath from among the sons of Levi, by their families, by their fathers' households, from 30 years and upward, even to 50 years old, all who enter the service to do the work in the tent of meeting. This is the work of the descendants of Kohath in the tent of meeting, concerning the most holy thing. Now here we're getting down to it. And number 5, when the camp sets out. Where Israelites wandered in the wilderness 40 years. They didn't stay. They didn't move every day, but when they stayed here for a little bit, and they stayed there for a little bit, and when they were to move, there were certain things they had to do before they moved, especially handling the ark and the holy thing. And here we go. And when the camp sets out, Aaron and his sons shall go in, and they shall take down the veil of the screen and cover the ark of the testimony with it. And they shall lay a covering of porpoise skin on it, and shall spread over it a cloth of pure blue, and shall insert its pole. Over the table of the bread of presence they shall also spread a cloth of blue, and put on it the dishes and the pans and the sacrificial bowls and the jars for the drink offering, and the continual bread shall be on it. They shall spread over them a cloth of scarlet material, and cover the same with a covering of porpoise skin, and they shall insert its poles. Then they shall take a blue cloth, and cover the lampstand for the light, along with its lamps and its snuffers, and its trays, and all its oil vessels by which they serve. And they shall put it and all its utensils in a covering of porpoise skin, and shall put it on the carrying bars. Over the golden altar they shall spread a blue cloth, and cover it with a porpoise skin, and insert its pole. And they shall take all the utensils of service which they serve in the sanctuary, and put them in a blue cloth, and cover them with the porpoise skin, and put them on carrying bars. Then they shall take away the ashes from the altar, and spread a purple cloth over it. And it goes on and on and on. And then is to set out. After that, the sons of Kohath. Now they're coming in after all these things have been covered up. They're not coming in there and seeing them just like they were in worship. They've covered them up, they've prepared them, and now the sons of Kohath are going to come in to carry them, so that, here's the key, so that they will not touch the holy objects and die. Okay? He already told them back in Numbers. Okay. These are the things in the tent of meeting which the sons of Kohath are to carry. The responsibility of Eleazar and the son of Aaron the priest is the oil, blah, blah, blah. And then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Do not let the tribe of the families of the Kohathites be cut off from among the Levites. I'm not sure I understand what that means. But I just told you, you cover them up, you prepare the ark, you prepare all the holy things, just like I told you, so that they may live and not die when they approach the most holy objects. Aaron and his sons shall go in. Now listen to this verse 20. But they shall not go in to see the holy objects, even for a moment, or they will die. Boom, boom. Now God laid all that out in Numbers. I mean in graphic detail. You do this, you group of people, you do this, you carry it. Everyone had an assignment. Clear. And what were they supposed to do with the laws of Moses? Father to son, son to son, father to son. That my ordinances will all be known throughout all the ages, that they're to hand transfer those ordinances and my laws from person to person, from now on, amen. That's what they were supposed to do. Talk about them in the morning, talk about them in the evening. Make sure that it's your responsibility to know what they're supposed to do, my ordinances. Now, let's fast forward back to King David. David was not a perfect individual. David had his faults. But God said he was a man after his own heart, and I believe it was a true penitent person is what he was. Here we are, David is a king. He replaced Saul. There's a lot in between there. But stop a minute, we're talking about reverence, right? We already described what reverence is. Dutiful, respectful, honorable, worshipful, obedient. And here we go. Happy time. David is victorious over the Philistines. They have the ark. The ark is important to David. I want to bring it back. What did he do? David is in control. This ark has been with Abinadab for 20 years. Now they want to bring it to Jerusalem. And if you look at that, here's where a lot of people fall out with active, loud reverence. What was David and the entire group doing as they were moving this ark on that cart before Uzzah? Somebody help me out there. Go back to screensaver is killing me. Go back to 2 Samuel 6. 2 Samuel 6, in the first couple of verses there before it gets to the part, what was David and his whole entourage doing as they were moving this ark?
Celebrating with all kinds of instruments, making wood, fires, casting nets,
Now wait a minute. Where's God? In this setting, where's God? Between the cherubim, does he not? He's in that ark. That's the presence. That's God in his presence right there. And they were happy. Now, the other thing I want to stimulate your thinking is David's king. How many kings go do menial tasks like that? And when I say menial, it usually sends somebody to do something that has some labor to it, or it's going to be long and drawn out. They command it, and it is done. David didn't do that. That's one of the things I love about David and his leadership style. David led from the front. He didn't lead from the back. To the point that they had to say, David, you can't go out and fight with us no more. You're too valuable to us. You're getting old. You're going to get killed. We got to take care of you. He led from the front. And here he is, every step of the way. And if you look at that, that was a long trek. And when they traveled back then, it was not easy. But here's the king. Excess of 30,000 people dancing before God. Then boom, we have the event of Uzzah. And what did David do? Help me out. How did David take that when he killed Uzzah? Now think about it. Don't you know? You kind of got to get... I'm sorry, did I not get that right? I stand corrected. That's the Holy Spirit at work there.
Everything's in alphabetical.
Yeah, we were gonna review it. We're gonna hang it for you too.
I would think probably that would be my first reaction. Maybe. If I'm honest, I mean, we're called to try to give grace, but God demands reverence. My reverence. Your reverence. And over in Numbers, as we pointed out, he was specific, categorically, who was to carry the Ark of the Covenant and all the holy things, and that information was supposed to be handed down, boom, 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 generation to generation, so they all would honor me with their actions and their words and their deeds. Right? Well, what was the effect? Now, to walk reverently doesn't mean that we know that we have to learn as we go, right, Brother Michael? It's a journey. When we figure out we should have done something differently, we change our mode of thinking and our way of doing things. Not necessarily thinking, put it in practice. What happened to David? He got mad initially, and then when they left the ark there, he said, I can't move it. Who can move it? Who can move the ark? Well, you look down, round 2. David said when they moved the ark, right after Uzzah died, they put it in another place, and I can't recall the name of it, but it stayed there for 3 months, and God blessed them richly. David said, I still want to move this ark to Jerusalem, to its final home. Now, I want you to pay attention to something that, unless you miss it, it was I want to think they were dancing before the Lord. Now look at verse 13 in 2 Samuel 6. Run over there real quick. 2 Samuel 6. If you don't think that God didn't get David's attention, 2 Samuel 6, and somebody read for me verse 13.
So it was that when the bearers of the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed the ox for that.
Let me tell you what David did. David was so scared of what he saw when he realized what happened that what I haven't studied, maybe one of y'all can help me out here, how far it was from where the ark was until they got to Jerusalem. But now I've inquired of some people I have a lot of respect for, and if you look at that, David was so awed by God and his reaction. Every 6 steps that they had, all those holy things on their shoulders, they stopped and they offered a fatling, they offered a sacrifice. Every 6 steps. God, I messed up. That wasn't a requirement. That was his response to his inadequacy of what he didn't do right. Now, I know he knew he should have done differently because I want to share that with you. In 1 Chronicles 15, 1 through 15, let's go over there real quick. 1 Chronicles. First Chronicles 15. I'm going to hurry through this because we don't have but a minute. Now David built houses for himself in the city of David, and he prepared a place for the ark of God and pitched a tent for it. Now, verse 2. Then David said, No one is to carry the ark of God but the Levites, for the Lord chose them to carry the ark of God and to minister to him forever. Okay? Change his tune. Drop down there to verse 11. Then David called for Zadok and Abiathar the priests and the Levites, and he goes on to name them. And he said, You prepare yourself to take the ark. Then you look down there at verse 13. Because you did not carry it at the first, the Lord our God made an outburst on us, for we did not seek him according to the ordinance. How come David knew that then? Do you think he didn't know it before he moved the ark? I'm going to say he did. I don't know that, but I think that. I think he knew the ordinance, and perhaps he chose to ignore it, and it cost him. And I'm not so sure that Uzzah and Uriah and Abinadab, they knew what they should have done. But for whatever reason, they chose not to move it like God did. Now, I want to point something else out to you. Look at 11 through 13. No, it was over the other one where it said that because it was a lack of irreverence, and the word in my Bible says irreverence, that they showed God irreverence in moving the ark. Hasn't. He used that word, irreverence. So at the end of the day, reverence calls for us to understand who we are revering. Would you not agree? We got to know who we're revering first, and then how are we to act in reverence toward that individual? In this case, God. And if God put us in that position, we're not in any position to change what he feels is important to him. Never, ever, ever, never forget. If it was important to God then, it's important to God now. And they were irreverent to his specific wishes a long time after that. And it cost Uzzah his life. Maybe they thought because they had carried, if you keep that ark that long, they thought, well, God's going to take care of us. We don't really have to pay attention to the details. Well, yes, you do. Yes, you do. That doesn't mean legalistically, but in this case, thank God we're come to worship God in spirit and truth. We don't have to do all those sacraments that they had in place back then. We'd be dead. A lot of us would be. Reverence, to show reverence in an assembly like this, we have to leave the cares of the world behind us. We come here to show God respect and awe. And I think that we do, a lot of times we forget that we are in awe of God. If not, get on your knees and pray. Figure out how to get close to God so when you come here, that you can be here about him. Not me, not you, not you. We're here to worship Him. That could be singing. That could be quiet prayer. That could be anything. Mary and Martha is a classic example of not showing what's important. Martha wanted help. She was too busy working on the feeding and all the duties, and Mary wanted to be at the feet of Jesus. And what did Jesus tell her? Forget the cares of the world. Mary has chose something that's more valuable to her, the Word of God. She was in awe of Jesus. And if we don't come to worship Him here in awe, and then, number one, you can't worship in awe without prior preparation, mentally. You can't be in awe of something you don't study. You can't be in awe and worship God appropriately unless the environment is such that we can focus on God. Now, we got life. We've got kids. We've got a lot of different things that affect us. But at the end of the day, every last one of us can do something to enhance the environment to where we can be in awe of God while we're here, because He's here. He's here. And you can't be in awe of God if you don't understand what He has done for you. Make this personal. You will not be in front of God with your wife. You will not be in front of God with your husband or your son or your daughter. You will be in front of God on your knees, you and Him. And unless we have that reconciliation with Jesus Christ between us, that's going to be a bad day. Thank you. Thank you for